Hi everyone, Amy here, hopping on live today with a question. If hiring is one of the highest risk decisions startups can make, why is it sometimes or maybe even often unstructured? A lot of times, hiring failures don't happen due to talent problems, but alignment problems. And yes, med device, biotech startups absolutely face real challenges like with regulatory and or long development cycles, but hiring misalignment, this is one of the few risks that leaders can actually control. And it's also one of the most expensive to get wrong. In this video, I'm going to talk about how you can get hiring right, why hiring mishaps happen, and what causes hiring mishaps, why hiring mishaps happen, what it looks like to build a solid foundation before scaling. So let's go ahead and dive in. And as always, if you are watching live and you have a comment, feel free to drop it in the comments there. And if you're watching the replay, thank you for watching, and I'll come back to any comments that you might leave in the chat. All right, so again, we're going to talk about the impact of a bad hire, why hiring mishaps sometimes happen, and how you can get hiring right. So what are some of the reasons or causes of hiring failures? A lot of times it's lack of clarity at the start of the process. So maybe the leadership team is not aligned altogether on what you're looking for in the ideal candidate. So maybe the candidate profile is not fully clearly built out. A lot of times there's the initiative is speed to hire quickly without structure. And so maybe the interview process steps and what you're looking for in each step is not aligned. And then sometimes it's a cultural mismatch or a goal and long-term opportunity mismatch. So you want to be keeping in mind the candidate goals, and then does the opportunity match that? If any of these elements are not aligned, this could absolutely lead to short turnaround time and decreased lower retention rates. And so these are a few of the reasons why hiring initiatives fail. So now let's look at why does this matter? What is the impact potentially of a bad hire to your startup organization? So what's the cost of getting it wrong? Well, I think a common number that comes to mind for a lot of us when we think about a bad hire is around 30% of the employee's first year earnings. So 30%, not earnings, 30% of their salary. And that can be true for a lot of roles. But when you are talking about a quota carrying sales rep, the kind of employee that you're looking to hire for your med device or biotech startup, the impact of a bad hire can be much higher, much greater than 30% because they're carrying a quota. So you're expecting them to bring in revenue. So there's a lot of sources out there that cite much higher numbers. Many times I've seen $240,000 for the cost of one bad sales hire, one bad quota carrying hire. But there are also many sources out there that cite over $1 million to for just one bad hire alone. So how do these costs escalate when you're talking about sales rep hires? Well, to break it down quickly, you've got the initial hiring, which is the onboarding, the training, and this could be around $100,000. And then whenever you are bringing on a new sales rep, well, they're learning, they're building, they're growing, so you don't expect to typically make the return on the full quota for the year. So for that unmissed quota where they are ramping up. And then there's also, if you made a bad hire, it's unlikely that they're making their number. So you could be potentially missing out on maybe $500,000 in revenue. This number could be higher, could be a little bit lower, depending on the role, of course. And then it typically takes about 6 months to realize, okay, we didn't get it right here. We made a bad hire. So then it takes typically another 6 months or at least longer to exit the wrong hire out of the organization. And during that time, you're still paying their salary, you're still paying their benefits. And so it could be $60,000 or it could be much higher. A lot of these numbers that I'm sharing could be potentially pretty conservative. And then you want to think about when you have the wrong person on the team, the impact to the team and the team morale and the impact to customers. You could potentially have some account losses. So this is how you get that bigger number when you're talking about a bad hire for a quota carrying rep. So with the numbers that I've shared so far, this brings us to around $750,000 for one misaligned hire. And that's before you even start working to backfill the role with the right hire. And then that takes additional time as well. And then you are starting the process over again. So with those additional numbers, this is how we get to over $1 million. And it takes this time period. We want to keep that in mind as well. About 18 months then to recover from a bad hire. Remember, about 6 months in, you're learning, okay, we didn't get quite the right fit. Then it takes an additional however many months, maybe several months. So that's a full year where you've made the bad hire, exiting them out of the organization, and then you're starting the process over again. So that's typically another 6 months before you onboard a new employee. So this is how you get to over $1 million for one bad hire alone and 18 months to recover from. And so now imagine these big numbers when you are launching a team. And so not just one new hire, but filling an entire team, building it out and not getting it right at the start. Just imagine the impact of an unstructured hiring process and how that could damage funding for your project Runway. All right, so we've talked about some of the reasons why bad hires, mishires happen, and we've talked about the impact. Now what you really want to know is, how can you get it right? How can you attract, select, and ultimately retain the optimal team and employees for your organization long term? So, well, the first thing that you want to do is make sure that your executive leadership team is aligned on, of course, the company mission and your ideal customer. And once you have that starting out, this is going to help you drive your vision of the culture that you want to create to help carry forth that mission. And then all of that is going to then inform your candidate profile. And having your candidate profile locked in before starting your search is imperative. It's very important. Yes, sometimes we can have some of the details, some of our must-haves, and we need to go ahead and get started and move. And then our other steps are going to be informed with the initial steps that we take. So I get that, and that can be okay too. Sometimes you do have to get started, but you want to have your must-haves. And I recommend having ideally 3 candidate profiles so that you don't miss out on potentially strong fits that maybe are candidates that don't check every single box, but they're still a great fit. So what that would look like is, okay, this is my perfect ideal candidate profile. If I have a candidate that checks every single box, this is it. And then maybe 1 or 2 profiles outside of that where they're not checking all of those boxes, some of them, but this could also be a fit here and this could also be a fit here. And that way you can have some movement and you're not waiting on that perfect candidate, because a lot of times that perfect candidate is maybe not a culture fit, or maybe the goal and the opportunities with the company don't line up with the candidate's long-term goals. So you can have a great resume, a stellar performer, somebody that looks like a super strong candidate, but if their goals don't align with the company's goals, then you're not going to have a long-term fit there. All right, so you want to align on your candidate profile. All right, so what next? Well, then you want to structure your process. You want to have clear steps in the interview process. You want to have mapped out who is going to participate in the interview process and what you are evaluating at each step in the interview process, including what questions you're going to ask and what you're assessing for in each step. And then even also what to do when you have a hesitation, when you have a pause around a candidate. So this way you are prepared ahead of time. And keep in mind with each of these steps, so that's, once you've got the culture, the mission, the ideal candidate profile, then you know who's involved in the process. You have your ideal steps mapped out. Through each of those steps, you want to be making sure that you're getting curious and thinking about why you want each of those things. So why do you want what you want in your candidate profile? Why are you implementing the steps that you're going through? Why are you looking for what you are evaluating in that step? And the reason why you want to dig deeper and ask that why question is so that what you want and why you want what you want makes sense, and so that your actions make sense. Because if at any point your what you want and why you want don't line up, then you want to go back to the drawing board, because you're likely heading toward a failed initiative. So we will always want to get to the why. So be keeping that in mind and digging deeper as you're working to map out what your interview and hiring process is going to look like. That way you don't end up with a candidate that doesn't make sense for your role. So what are some examples of that, a want and a why that maybe don't quite make sense? So let's say, for example, and I see this a lot, and there's nothing necessarily wrong with it, but the example is starting. Let's say you're launching a product in a Salesforce for your startup, and you've got one main requirement, and that is that the candidate must have contacts and relationships in the space. And again, nothing wrong with that. But what if you are pulling candidates that are currently from, or looking for candidates that are currently in a company culture and day in the life role that doesn't really align with your company culture and your role? If it's vastly different, that candidate may not be happy in your company culture and in your role. So it's okay to have your must-haves, but then dig a little bit deeper to make sure that they're actually going to make sense so that you have the long-term fit. So that's one example. Another example would be veering away from the process that your structured process that you and your team design based on a gut feeling. That, and I've seen this happen before too, and I've seen it backfire multiple times, where you really like this candidate, maybe you and the candidate have something in common, and you just feel strong in your gut that they're who you want to go with, and so you abandon the process and start to think just with that gut lens rather than that structured process lens. And you want to implement both, but you don't want to veer away from your structure. So you want to make sure that company culture is aligned for the candidate, the day in the life of the role is aligned for the candidate, and that you're sticking to your process. Now, it's okay to pivot and adjust here and there, maybe combine some steps as needed, but you don't want to abandon your process and rush through, because this is what leads to costly bad hires. And then throughout the process, you want to make sure that you have clear and consistent communication. This is key as well. And this is a challenge that when you don't have that effective, clear, and consistent communication, then this can lead to not only mishires, but also major delays in the process. And time, we all know, is money. So when I say communication, what am I talking about? Communication with whom? Well, you want to have strong communication with your leadership team so that everybody is staying aligned with potential hesitations that they see in a candidate, how to address those, sharing your feedback, sharing your green lights, and this way your confidence elevates as you move the ideal candidate through the process. Also, clear and consistent communication with the candidate. And so this way, the story that they're hearing about the opportunity is true. And so this way they're more likely to stay if they do accept the role, because if anything changes, anything major changes in the role after an employee accepts, well, that major change could be a deal breaker for them. And so this is another thing that leads to turnover. And then if you're working with a recruiter, you also want to keep clear and consistent communication with the recruiter. And again, it seems like it might seem like it is this effective communication, consistent communication with everyone involved in the process might take a little bit more time, but it's going to ultimately save you time on a faster process moving forward with everyone aligned and everyone prepared, and then likely save you from making a bad hire. And these are some of the elements that I include in my attract, select, and retain framework. So attracting the right candidate is about awareness of what you, your company, your leadership team is looking for and why, and awareness about the candidate and what they're looking for and why, and do their goals match? So is everybody aligned before making that hire? And then select, this is about communication with the structured interviews, the shared criteria, and in making sure that you keep with that structured process. Yes, pivot, adjust, adapt as needed, but don't skip steps in the process, because if you did your thorough investigation of not only this is our planning, these are our interview process steps, but this is why we're doing them, then that's going to help you better stick to your framework for selecting talent. And then retaining, well, this is about expectations and reality of the actual role. So the story of the role that you're telling, think about it. If you're a leader and you think about from the candidate perspective, they are going from what you share with them. And so they're putting their trust in you around what the opportunity is going to look like once they step into the role. And again, if that changes, then it is easy to understand why they might be again starting to look, and which means you would be again starting to look. All right, so hopefully that was helpful and you enjoyed the content here. If you got some value, please remember to like and subscribe. Just a quick one to hop on and bring some value today. And if you are early in your hiring journey or you are about to scale, getting alignment before you hire can help protect your momentum. It can help protect your runway and the health of your team. And if you are curious about what that might look like for your organization, you're welcome to connect with me. The links to do so are below. Again, thank you for watching. We will see you in the next one, and see you soon.